This video is brought to you by Mubi, a curated streaming service showing exceptional films from around the globe. Get a whole month free at mubi.com/yarzaid. What can I say about The People Under the Stairs? Where do I even start? It's brilliant, it kinda gives me a panic attack, it's sweet, it's violent, and it's probably my favorite Wes Craven film. The People Under the Stairs follows a 13-year-old boy named Poindexter Williams, but everyone, friends and family included, calls him Fool. The name isn't meant to be a knock against his intellect. He's quite smart, survival smart, street smart.
Ain't the stupid kind of fool, only the ignorant kind, because he's just starting out.
Fool and his family live in a housing project in downtown Los Angeles, and they're on the verge of eviction. Contrastingly, their landlords, named the Robinsons, are quite well off and live in what's basically a mini mansion on the other side of town. With his mother sick and his sister Ruby unable to make ends meet on her own, Fool is convinced to help out Leroy, a friend of Ruby's, and Leroy's business partner Spencer break into the Robinsons' home to steal a rare collection of coins. The coins are worth a lot of money, more than enough for Fool to make a better life for him and for his family. Getting into the house proves to be a doable task. Not exactly easy, but doable. Getting out, on the other hand, that's a different story. Once Leroy and Fool get into the house, they find a place that is highly secured. A metal door, padlocked windows, and on top of that, a vicious guard dog. They sense immediately that something about this place isn't right. Fool more so than Leroy. At this point, we know they have a good reason to be wary of the house and of what it contains. We've already been introduced to the patrons of the house, who call each other Mommy and Daddy. We've been introduced to a girl named Alice, who is clearly terrified and unable to leave. And we know there's something in the walls.
Alice has been bad. She's been feeding that thing between the walls again.
So right away, we're primed for a tense, anxiety-filled ride. Fool wanders down to the basement and discovers the hordes of people living in the cellar. At first, it's them he's afraid of, understandably, but he quickly learns that the people under the stairs pose little to no danger to him. Not like Mommy and Daddy. Fool has to navigate his way through this labyrinth of a house and try to run and hide without being able to escape. And that's all I'm gonna say here. If you haven't seen it yet, stop watching, because as always, I'd like for some people to watch it if they've never seen it. Besides all of the things that make this a great horror movie, like the expertly built tension, the palpable fear in every scene, the way it has you on the edge of your seat, this movie has a persevering relevance in its themes, which include, but aren't limited to, class inequality and capitalism, racism and criminalized poverty, and housing discrimination and landlords. But before we get into those themes, I'd like to take a closer look at the culture of the 1980s. The People Under the Stairs was released in 1991, and the thematic elements that we see are representative of things that had been festering for decades. But for the sake of brevity and simplicity, let's look at what was going on right before it. Let's look at the 1980s. The 1980s were quite bleak and almost dystopian, but is there a decade that isn't? Not really. The 80s were characterized by prosperity and consumerism. There's a reason that malls have become almost synonymous with the 1980s. Even though the first mall was opened in 1956, it was during the 80s that it became ubiquitous and spending became a symbol of not only status, but existence even? Consumerism became so rampant that postmodern artist Barbara Kruger was inspired to make what's become one of her most famous works. I shop, therefore I am. And a lot of the entertainment that came out of the 80s were straight up critiques of that culture. They Live, which is based on a short story first published in 1963, is a tale warning about advertisements and consumerism and not being able to think for oneself. A drifter wanders around with these glasses that help him to see the truth of the world. He sees alien-like figures, he sees advertisements that really just tell him to obey and to consume. So everyone's buying stuff, everyone's getting ahead, everyone's getting rich, right? No. Not everyone. The 80s is the decade that saw the gap between the rich and the poor becoming wider and wider. The rich were getting richer, the middle class was becoming poorer, and the poor were starting to fall below the poverty line. During the 1980s, the rules that govern economic fortunes of Americans were quietly and perhaps permanently rewritten. Economists now report that the boom years of the 1980s were a bust for fully half of all Americans. At the same time, the safety net of social programs for the nation's poor was replaced by a safety net for the rich. speeding the decline of the middle class. That, combined with the crack epidemic which targeted many people in poorer communities, created an era of devastation, mass evictions, and homelessness. All the while, the television is saying this is the greatest era for American prosperity, that opportunity is around every corner. This big gap between the rich and the poor, this class disparity, this class warfare, this is the culture that the people under the stairs is in part a response to and a reflection of. By now, you have seen and heard plenty of the media that critiques capitalism. There have been lots of stories that have utilized this theme, from The Bicycle Thieves to They Live to Dawn of the Dead, but in recent years, the boom in discussing it in films and TV have started with movies like The Lego Movie, Parasite, Sorry to Bother You, Chicken Run. I'm dead-ass serious about that last one. You're no stranger to it, so I'll keep it brief and stick to observing the way these themes are depicted in the film. Fool and his family live in a building that has all but collapsed. The walls aren't structurally sound, there are rats and stray dogs living in the building. In order to get home, Fool has to squeeze himself and slide by squatters doing drugs on the stairs and at the main entrance, and weaves the camera through these tight, claustrophobic spaces, showing the grime and the discomfort of the building. When we're introduced to Mommy and Daddy, the first thing we see is Daddy feasting greedily on a meal big enough for 2 people and sitting comfortably in front of a warm fire. Their house is a safe, designed to not only keep the people on the inside from getting out, but to keep the people on the outside from getting in. They hoard their wealth in the basement, piles upon piles of money and rare coins sitting untouched, while they enclose themselves in this fortress. Before us depicted the class paranoia of wealthy people having their wealth being taken from them, of the poor getting revenge on them for having it all, that kind of wealth paranoia was showcased here with Mommy and Daddy. I'm gonna be saying Mommy and Daddy a lot, so get used to it. The first time we see them, they're discussing how they're going to evict the last family in the building and tear it down to build something new.
One last family in the Lenox Avenue building, then it's clear to tear down. We build a nice, neat condominium, we get clean people in there. Lots of nice wood for my fireplace, lots of nice...
Money.
And money.
Alice asks them what happens to the families they remove from their homes, but she doesn't get an answer because A, they don't allow her to speak freely, and B, the answer does not matter. The people they kick out on the street do not matter. What matters is the money and the wood for the fireplace. We have Bill Cobbs here in a short but fantastic role, and he describes the character of Mommy and Daddy, their evil habits, and their greed, explaining that they started out with funeral homes but found real estate to be much, much more profitable.
Started out as a family running a funeral home, selling cheap coffins for expensive prices. And they got their fingers in the real estate, started making a lot of money taking over people's homes. The more money they got, the greedier they got.
In the film, Roach is one of the kids that the Robinsons have trapped in their home, but he's the only one who's made it out from the cellar, instead taking shelter inside the walls. Daddy regularly shoots throughout the house, aiming wildly in an attempt to kill him and his rebellious spirit. Before Roach escaped to the walls, he had his tongue cut for speaking evil. He was too bold, too smart, and that has made him dangerous. Roach is the one who helps Fool to navigate his way through the walls and brings him to safety. Him teaching Fool how to survive is how Fool is able to survive and get comeuppance on the Robsons later. When Roach is shot and dies from his injuries, Daddy burns his body in the furnace and says,
Burn in hell for getting free, and burn in hell for showing the way!
This is kind of on par with revolutionaries and activists and anyone who guides anyone being silenced in the real world and resented for causing a stir, for showing the way. Mommy and Daddy are openly racist. If it's not them using slurs against Fool, it's Mommy at the very start of the film dreaming about what they get to do when they can tear down the apartment building.
Clean people in there.
Fool and his family live in a predominantly black neighborhood that's been all but abandoned by any kind of aid. People look at them as though they're all criminals, avoiding them entirely. Fool isn't a criminal. His biggest aspiration is to become a doctor so he can help his mom and other sick people. But the circumstances of poverty and their impending eviction forces Fool into a position where committing a crime is the one thing that's guaranteed to help his family. He's too young to get a legitimate job. There's no one else coming to their aid, so why not rob the wealthy landlords?
Wonder there's no money in the ghetto.
They're not gonna miss it. And though Fool is initially hesitant, Leroy convinces him easily by reminding him of what the risk is of not taking any action at all.
Or you want your family eating beans out in the street.
This also forces Fool to grow up way faster than he should. His sister does her best to shield him from experiencing too much too soon. She avoids telling him about his mother's cancer diagnosis and urges him to read his book instead. She wants for him to enjoy being young and not to worry about the world crumbling around them. But no amount of shielding can protect him from the truth of their own devastating poverty, the dangerous world surrounding him, or the extreme measures that are eventually taken to get them out of the dark. Leroy tells him about his mother's cancer diagnosis. He tells him about robbing the landlords, and he also tries to crush Fool's dream of becoming a doctor. All of this information, coupled with his mother telling him he is now the man of the house. Fool has to burn up in the sun before he's ready. It's reminiscent of the ways children brought up in poverty are often forced to grow up too fast, to drop out of school, to get jobs, to deal with the stress of rent and bills when they should be able to just enjoy being kids. But this is the reality that kids living in poverty from all over the world face every day. There's no time to be a kid when there's work to be done. The people under the stairs looks at the crime being committed in the first act with a very sympathetic gaze. You understand that Fool doesn't have much of a choice. It's the whole, would you steal a loaf of bread to feed your family thing? And the answer is, hell yes, why do you even have to ask? So remember Mommy's comment about demolishing the apartment building, building a new condominium and getting nice, clean people in there? Awesome! Here's a lengthy history of administrations doing exactly that through housing discrimination, banks, and landlords. There is great symbolism of the Robson estate, not just as it pertains to the wealth of exploitative landlords, but the neighborhood that the real house is part of has a long history with housing discrimination. This house is in the West Adams neighborhood of Los Angeles, the exact same neighborhood where the first Black Oscar winner, Hattie McDaniel, resided. West Adams had been exclusively white until residents started leaving for Beverly Hills, leaving a few empty homes that Black people, mainly actors and musicians, started to buy, including Hattie McDaniel. West Adams, which had been on the decline, was steadily becoming a cultural hotspot, but that was anything but good news to the remaining white residents. There were these things called restrictive covenants, things written into house deeds that prevented the properties from being bought by or sold to anyone who wasn't white. Sometimes people think about housing discrimination as if it was something that was just incidental, or down to a few bad apples in the real estate business, but these were actual laws written into the industry. The Housing Act encouraged land developers, realtors, and community residents to write racial restrictive covenants to keep neighborhoods from being redlined, which essentially divided cities according to their racial demographics in order to determine the economic desirability of certain neighborhoods. This practice provided a financial justification for racial restrictive covenants and allowed for their popular use. On top of this, redlining made it exceedingly more difficult for non-whites to purchase property because financing was refused in the only neighborhoods they were able to live. In 1945, these white residents attempted to get their Black neighbors evicted, insisting that the Black residents were breaking the law by living there and that restrictive covenants were protected by the Constitution and therefore needed to be upheld. So the Robsons' home, their insistence to keep people out of it, is more about just protecting their house and protecting their secrets in the cellar. It becomes a metaphor for redlining, keeping the Black people far away from what they view to be their turf. With Mommy's plan to build new condominiums and get clean people in there, when she says clean, what she's really saying is white. They keep buying up these buildings all over, making a profit like you wouldn't believe, and kick people out of their homes when it suits them. Or in Fool's case, they tell them to pay triple the amount of their rent or get out, and they are the only thing standing in the way of them tearing down the building for their own wealth. I mean, they are literally burning the remains of these people's homes to keep themselves warm. They were poor tenants. They were rich landlords. Can I make it any more obvious? Leroy, more than anyone else, has a lot of contempt for mommy and daddy. Leroy is not all good, to be clear, but his hatred for the Robinsons is very understandable. Even if we didn't know of the kids in the cellar or little Alice trapped in the house, we'd still get it. He's not just robbing them because they have a rare collection of coins. He'd probably try to do it if there were no coins, because in his eyes, they deserve to be robbed, especially since all they've been doing is robbing other people, the tenants they kick out even when they pay their rent, buying buildings just to rob people of their homes. Their comeuppance is overdue.
Now this is the big one, and somebody deserves to be robbed. Somebody who don't care nothing about families or about the neighborhood. He just want to bring the wrecking ball in so he can line his pockets. So the name of the company is the same as the name on your eviction notice. Same guy who owns the liquor store owns this building and half the buildings in the ghetto.
I wanted to talk about this one for a few reasons. The main one is that November 1st is the 30-year anniversary of this movie, and I love an anniversary, especially when it's to do with a movie as great as this one. The second is that the topic of housing discrimination and parasitic landlords, while always relevant, became a really important topic in 2020 when people were getting evicted, even when the pandemic literally prevented them from getting work. Sadly, this movie is one of those rare ones that's just as relevant now as it was when it was first released. And thirdly, it'll be getting a remake, and I don't know. I wanted people who haven't seen the original to be able to appreciate it on its own, I guess. There are a lot of books I read for this video, many that I didn't even end up including a lot, but they are great reads, like Race and Real Estate, Race for Profit, Evicted, and of course The Color of Law. I'll be sure to put those in the description. Thank you for watching, and please watch The People Under the Stairs. Mubi is a curated streaming service, a place to watch beautiful, interesting, incredible cinema. Every day, Mubi premieres a new film. From iconic directors to emerging auteurs, there's always something new to discover. With Mubi, each and every film is hand-selected. It's like your own personal film festival, streaming anytime, anywhere. I am always happy and honored to sing Mubi's praises. I've discovered so many great films on the service, some that I fear I would have never heard about if not for Mubi. It's the equivalent of crate digging at a record store in pursuit of obscure and underheard albums, except for movies. And there are so many great ones that I could tell you about, but I wanted to restrict it to just 3. Those are Inferno, Demons, and Perfumed Nightmare. Inferno is the thematic sequel to Dario Argento's masterpiece, Suspiria. Like in Suspiria, there's an ancient witch and some messed up stuff happening, and if you like Suspiria, you're probably gonna like Inferno. If you like Inferno, you just like Dario Argento, and that's an amazing journey to take. Demons from 1985. I love a horror movie that takes place in a confined space, and I especially love scary stories that take place in movie theaters because it's like my favorite place in the world, and it unsettles me. Phantom of the Megaplex was just the beginning. And the last one I'll leave you with, Perfumed Nightmare. It's a story about dreams and disillusionment and sort of expectations versus reality, which I think is always very relevant, and it's very poignant in how it's portrayed in this movie, which I think is kind of a masterpiece. So those are my recommendations. If you get Mubi, you can watch all of those right now. So if any of that interests you, like any of it at all, what are you waiting for? Get a whole month free at mubi.com/Yarzade.